Yogeshwari. Good morning, Maharani Didi. Good morning, Dante. Good morning, Yogeshwari Didi. Today is Ekadashi, and we have a very special presenter today, Achyuta Gopi, also known as Transcendental Pokemon Catcher. And she is going to share um, this Life of Acharya series with us today. Okay, Achyuta Gopi, good morning. Thank you so much for coming on. The Lord is very happy to see a smile on this channel. Hare Krishna.
Jai Hare Krishna, Shri Radha Murlidhara ki jai, Shri Gauri Chandra ki jai. So thank you once again for having me for this wonderful Ekadashi morning. It's without doubt the best way to begin anything, everything, at all times. So we'll dive right in, right after our Mangala Charna. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Desatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyeva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. So we've been doing this Vaishnava Acharya series for quite some time, and we normally have examples of what we should do and examples of the footsteps that we want to follow in. And sometimes I think it's fun and also a learning experience to look at what we don't want to do. So today is going to be one of those don't do that ones. But also there's going to be a lot of lessons for things that we can do and things that we should do. And so this is going to be a section that I'll read from Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat. And as we've been hearing about all of these different Vaishnavacharyas, we'll see a little bit of a cast of family members make cameo appearances in this wonderful, wonderful pastime of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And since the yesterday, today, tomorrow, there are so many different themes going on. There was just a 9-day Navaratri celebration, celebrating the goddess Durga in so many different forms. And it culminates with Ram Vijay Utsav, which was yesterday, the day of victory for Lord Sri Ramachandra. And usually after Durga Puja and Ram Vijayotsav, then they have a puja for Saraswati Devi. So that would normally be today. So all of these different festivals are coming, and then all of these things culminate. It's all going to make sense. Um, but I wanted to focus on this pastime, which happens to be one of my favorites. And I mean, which one can I say? You know, that's not my favorite. That doesn't really happen. But this is really near and dear to my heart. And so we'll read about this pastime, and then we'll discuss a little bit, interjecting. So this is from Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat, given to us by Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur, who has painstakingly put together biographical diary of sorts of the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, even lamenting. He says, you know, how did I miss the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, of Gaurachandra? How did I miss all of these pastimes? But somehow he's heard about these pastimes, and these pastimes have captured his mind and his heart until he had no other choice but to pen them down. And tomorrow we celebrate Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, yet another of our biographical commentators who is able to write down and note down the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu just for all of us. So without further ado, we have this pastime from Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat to be could not ever pass by anyone else. When the Lord wants to perform chivalrous, who can be better use of weapons? When he reveals amorous pastimes, he captivates the hearts of millions of living entities. When he wants to enjoy opulence, his magnificent display of wealth is unmatched. Now, in his pastimes as an erudite scholar, there was no one who could equal his arrogance. When the same Lord accepted the renounced order of life, who could excel him in terms of devotion, dedication, and renunciation? And yet, in all the Lord's incarnations, the most wonderful thing is his voluntary, loving defeat at the hands of his pure, unalloyed devotees. Which, that one sentence in and of itself is wonderfully amazing. And as Kartik is coming, we'll be celebrating an entire month dedicated to how the Lord comes under his voluntary loving defeat at the hands of his pure unalloyed devotees. One day, as Nimai Pandit walked down the street surrounded by his students, his movements, dress, and demeanor were like that of a king. He wore a golden yellow dhoti just like Krishna. His face displayed soft reddish lips. He wore tilak on his forehead and held books in his hands. Anyone who beheld Nimai's lotus petal eyes became freed from all sinful thoughts and reactions. The Lord had a restless nature. As he walked with his students, he swung his arms in a carefree manner. Srivas Pandit happened to be walking that way. As soon as he saw the Lord, he felt great happiness. Nimai offered his obeisances to Srivas Pandit as soon as he saw him. With a laugh, Srivas inquired, "Where are you going, my dear epitome of vanity? What futile work are you wasting your time on instead of worshipping the Supreme Lord Krishna? Why do you pass your days and nights teaching people non-stop? Why do you not allow people to educate themselves so that they can understand the Supreme Lord and devotional service? What use is education if engagement in devotional service to the Lord is not the ultimate goal? From now on, do not waste your time with futile activities. You've been educated, and so now you should utilize your time in worshiping Krishna." This is a very interesting conversation, or a way to open a dialogue with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We've just established that no one can equal Nimai in beauty or grace or elegance or even arrogance, opulence. No one can equal him. And the first thing that Srivas Pandit says to him is, "Why are you wasting your time? What useless thing are you going to do today?" So we can see that this is quite interesting and astonishing. But we spoke about Srivas Thakur and Srivas Pandit before, and he was there at the very birth of Nimai Pandit. He was one of the dear friends of Jagannath Mishra, and so he was considered like an uncle to Nimai. And so he was often put in the position to chastise Nimai or correct him if he saw him going down a wrong path. So Srivas now, he wants Nimai to do nothing but worship Krishna and really come into the essence of this incarnation. However, the Lord has his own plan. Nimai said, "My dear respected Pandit, I am sure that by your grace, devotional service to Krishna is possible, even for me." The Lord graciously took leave of Srivas and went to the Ganga. The Lord's beauty was indescribable as he sat in the midst of his students. One might compare him to the moon surrounded by the stars in the sky, but the moon's beauty is flawed with its waxing and waning and spots. Therefore, that comparison is inadequate. To compare Nimai with Brihaspati is also inadequate. Whereas Brihaspati is the preceptor of the demigods, the Lord is the shelter and instructor of all living entities. To compare the Lord with Cupid is also incorrect. Thinking about Cupid invokes material desires that ultimately cause grief, whereas remembrance of the Lord results in purification and freedom from material bondage. It seems that all analogies are inappropriate, except the one that is readily accepted by the heart of Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur. Sri Nanda Kumar Krishna used to sit on the shore of the Jamuna, surrounded by his cowherd boyfriends. That same Krishna Chandra and the same cowherd boys were now sitting on the shore of the Ganga at Navadvip. Whoever beheld the Lord's charming face at that time experienced inexplicable ecstasy. Indeed, there is no way to estimate the amount of good fortune that the people accumulated just by seeing the Lord. One could become free from material bondage just by simply seeing the fortunate souls whose hearts had been touched by the blissful experience of the Supreme Lord. The author says, unfortunately, I have taken a sinful and wretched birth and was not there at the time of the Lord's manifest pastimes. O Lord Gauda Chandra and Lord Nityananda, I pray that wherever you perform your transcendental pastimes with your eternal associates, may I also be present as your humble and insignificant servant. Nimai would often say, I will accept that person as a scholar who has the courage to come and argue with me. In this way, the Lord boasted and thus destroyed the false ego of all the scholars of Navadvip. The Lord had countless followers, and this is before social media. People would simply come and offer themselves to him. Every day, young Brahmin boys would come and pray at his lotus feet. Oh, great scholar, I want to study under you so that I may learn something. Please be gracious and grant me this wish. Nimai would smile and accept them all. In this way, the number of students increased day by day. Navadvip was a great center of learning in those days, full of teachers and scholars well versed in all branches of Shastra. Titles like Bhattacharya, Chakravarti, Mishra, and Acharya were common, and the only work of these men was teaching. Their sport was debate, and in their intolerant and impatient manner, they endeavored by any means to win an argument. Even if a well-respected scholar would make valuable points, others would invariably disagree with him. Now this sounds exactly like social media. In the mood of an insolent and arrogant scholar, Nimai's habit was to constantly rebuke the other pundits and refute their arguments right to their faces. There was not a teacher in Navadvip who could confront the Lord's arguments and assert a second opinion. As soon as any scholar would see the Lord, such fear gripped his heart that he would immediately become obsequious, submissive, and subservient. Whoever conversed with the Lord, even by chance, became his dedicated servant. Everyone knew the Lord's intellect and erudition, which he displayed from his early childhood. Within their hearts, everyone was convinced that he could never be defeated. The mere sight of Nimai created a feeling of awe and respect, so that all the scholars became submissive in his presence. Once, a very learned but puffed up scholar, holding the title of Digvijay, one who has conquered all directions, came to Navadvip. Now, last Ekadashi, we spoke about Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, who also had a run-in with a certain Digvijay Pandit. So this was the like Olympic sport of the day. Everyone would study long and hard and do theses and dissertations, and only to defeat somebody else. Like the entire point was just debate and arguing. Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur said, even if the person made a good point, like even if you agreed, you had to disagree because that was the game. Which to me sounds like some sort of hellish torture. But this was Navadvip. This was the seat of learning. This was the universal, the university of the time. And Nimai is at the center of it all. And he's not very old. So now we have a Digvijaya Pandit. He was a dedicated devotee of the goddess of learning, Saraswati. Mother Saraswati is actually non-different from Lakshmi Devi, the goddess of fortune, the eternal consort of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Which I thought fitting because today would be Saraswati Puja. By the Brahman's desire and good fortune, he had received the benediction from goddess Saraswati to become the Digvijay scholar. Having received this benediction, the Brahmin traveled all over India, conquering scholars wherever he went. The entire contents of Shastra were at his command. No one could challenge him and come out victorious. Indeed, many scholars could not even follow his introduction to the main dissertation, and so he went unchecked everywhere. Have we ever read anything where you can't even really get past the intro and the preface? Like you've got just like an author's note and you're like, I'm already lost. I have no idea what's happening. This is the introduction for our Digvijaya Pandit, whose name happens to be Keshav Kashmiri. So, having heard of Navadvip's reputation as a center of learning, the Digvijaya arrived, leading a procession of elephants, horses, and men. So, being a professor at that time was not just, a title. You had status. It came with wealth and opulence. News of his arrival spread like wildfire, and the teachers of Navadvip became alarmed, having heard that he was a direct recipient of Goddess Saraswati's benediction. Navadvip was considered to be the world's premier center of learning. Thus, if the Digvijaya were to defeat its scholars, its glory would certainly be diminished, and the whole world would hear of its failure. And yet, no one had the courage to challenge the Digvijaya, for it was understood that Mother Saraswati appeared upon his tongue personally whenever he spoke. How could a mere human being defeat him? Being in great anxiety, the scholars of Navadvip practically gave up their normal activities. Nimai's students informed him, after conquering all other parts of the world, a Digvijaya Pandit has come to Navadvip, leading a great procession to challenge our scholars in debate. He says that if there are no challengers, he wants a letter proclaiming his victory. So these scholars would go around, and instead, they have like wrestling, you have like a championship belt. Instead of a whole championship belt, now you have like a scroll with like all the names of the people that you've defeated that have had to like sign this commentary saying how they were defeated and how they lost, which is kind of like terrible. It's like sports commentary now. You ever see after the opponents lose and then the media comes and they're like, so why do you think you lost? And the sports people never really want to answer those questions, but that's what this was. We have Olympic sports circa 500 years ago. So he says that if there are no challengers, he wants a letter proclaiming his victory. Lord Gaurachandra smiled and said, listen, I will tell you the actual situation. The Supreme Lord does not tolerate anyone who is proud and arrogant. When the Lord finds that someone has become proud and arrogant due to some God-gifted personal quality, he invariably removes the cause of that conceit. What I like is the reminder that these are God-given personal qualities, which everyone has. And so I kind of think that it's a good thing to focus on and a good thing to bring back into our minds. Like whenever you're feeling a little bit low, like, oh wait, I have a Govinda given talent. Like, take a minute, find it. It's there, I promise. But, there's a fine line between appreciation and then the conceit that comes because of the appreciation. A fruit-laden tree and a person endowed with all good qualities bow down with humility. You must have heard of other great conquerors like Bana, Naraka, and Ravana. Interestingly enough, he only names the demons. Did the Lord neglect to cut down their great burden of pride? Here in Navadvip, you will witness the end of this overbearing scholar. So as yesterday was also Ram Vijayotsav, I thought that it was quite nice that even Ravan's mentioned. That evening, Nimai went to the Ganga. After sprinkling some Ganga water on his head and offering obeisances, Nimai sat down with his students. He then began to discourse on various topics, and no one could understand that he was simultaneously considering the manner in which he would defeat the Digvijay Pandit. The Lord thought, this Brahmin has become exceedingly arrogant and thinks that no one in the world can defeat him. If I humble him in front of everyone, he will be so ashamed that it will be like killing him. People will dishonor him and he will eventually die from humiliation. Better that I confront him in a secluded place. In this way I can take away his pride without destroying him. How intense are these debates? Like, have you ever debated with somebody and at the end you kind of like the debate's over and then you're like, you know what? I have to die. Like, I can't deal with it. These debates are so intense that their honor, everything, their whole prestige, their entire identity is on the line. And now it's become like a matter of like the end of their existence if they happen to lose this debate. Which, I mean, my goodness, why do this to yourself? But it does call into play just how far people are willing to go for their prestige, how far people are willing to go for their reputation and for their name and fame. And once you've got that name and fame, you have to do anything and everything to protect it, or it feels like the end of your entire existence. But our Lord is so kind that he takes this into consideration. He's gonna take away the pride and the conceit that has come from all of this learning, but he doesn't want to destroy this person's entire persona. How kind is Lord Gaurachandra? Like, this is my Lord. This is why I like him. So, while Nimai was thinking in this way, the Digvijay arrived at the Ganga. As dusk faded into night, the Ganga looked radiant beneath the full moon in the clear sky. Nimai looked brilliant in the midst of his students, and his exquisite beauty was captivating. A sweet smile decorated his moon-like face, and his beautiful eyes sent forth transcendently merciful glances. His hair was black and curly, and his shoulders were broad. His perfectly proportioned body was large, and a Brahmin's thread was draped over his shoulders. Sri Gauranga sat like a yogi, and many students were gathered around him that evening. The Digvijay was astonished to see the wonderful assembly. He thought, is this Nimai Pandit? The Digvijay stood spellbound for some time. I mean, who wouldn't be? And then inquired from one of the students, who is this person? This is the famous Nimai Pandit, replied the student. After offering his obeisances to the Ganga, the Digvijay moved a little closer to the Lord. When he noticed him, Nimai smiled and offered the Digvijay a seat. Having conquered all other scholars in the land, the Digvijay was naturally fearless, but in Nimai's presence, he was awestruck. It is a fact that whoever approaches the Lord in a challenging mood will feel both awe and fear. There's our great reciprocating Lord, right? He's always reciprocating exactly how we approach him. So we approach in a challenging mood, and you can't really cheat the person seated within the heart who knows every emotion, thought, and conscious yearning before we even know it. So if we approach the Lord in a challenging mood, and we know when we do it, we know when we ask the questions, and they're not really submissive. It's kind of like the question that leads into the, now, Lord, why would you set up a situation like this? So we know when we approach it in a challenging manner, will feel both awe and fear. And we do see this even with people who come to Krishna consciousness for the first time. There's such an array of different emotions. There are some people that I've seen that have said they're like, I can't even go close to the altar. Like, I don't even know what's going on over there. But it's just too much. It's too overwhelming. And for me, growing up looking at the deities on the altar as my dearest friends, it's such an interesting take to see someone think, this is just too overwhelming. I can't. Their presence is too strong. I'm like, really? Huh. I feel like I want to just run closer. But it just goes to show that everybody's mindset, every single heart is meeting Krishna, and Krishna's reciprocating. After exchanging a few words with the Pandit, Nimai said, "My dear sir, you are a wonderful poet. There is no subject that you cannot perfectly describe. Please compose some verses in glorification of Mother Ganga, so that whoever hears the description will be purified of all sins." Instantly, the Digvijay Pandit began reciting verses in praise of the Ganga. Who can even imagine the artistry of his presentation? Verses swiftly came from his mouth like a continuous roll of thunder. Whoever heard the performance certainly believed that Mother Saraswati had personally appeared on the tip of his tongue. Was it humanly possible to find a mistake in his composition? There seemed to be no one present who could even properly understand the verses. Nimai's hundreds of students simply stared at the Pandit with wide open mouths. "Hai Ram! Oh Lord!" they exclaimed. "Is it possible for any human being to compose such eloquent poetry?" For nearly an hour, the Digvijay Pandit composed his verses. There seemed to be no end to his brilliant oration. This is like the most epic rap battle that had ever been written. And just done by one man. For an hour. Can you imagine composing continuous raps for an hour? No pause. I mean, I can understand why he conquered in many directions. He seems like he's got it together. You know, in New York we have Broadway and we have like Hamilton and everybody's like, rapping history and doing a lot of things. And all I could think of as I was meditating on this and reading this was, wow, these guys have nothing on the Keshav Kashmiri, man. He had skills. So for nearly an hour, at last, when he was finished, Nimai smiled sweetly and said, "Your poetry is so exceptional that no one can understand it unless you explain it." That is almost the meanest thing you can say to someone who has been rapping for an hour. He's giving everything he's got. And Nimai says, "Wow, no idea what you just said." "Your verses have certainly glorified Mother Ganga very nicely. Now please analyze them." The Lord's sweet speech acted like an intoxicating beverage upon the Digvijay. But as soon as he began his explanation, Nimai interrupted to point out some mistakes. He said, "According to the rules of grammar, your use of figures of speech is flawed in many places. Please explain this." The Digvijay Pandit had somehow lost his intelligence, and so he could not offer a proper explanation for the faults Nimai Pandit pointed out. Yes, because the poor man was just speaking for an hour. And then he had to go back and then retrace his whole steps. Only for Nimai to say, there was a mistake. Indeed, his feeble and confused attempts to defend his composition elicited further criticism from the Lord. The Digvijay's unprecedented talent seemed to have vanished, and the whole situation became incomprehensible for him. In fact, he did not even seem to understand his own identity. The poor man lost track of who he was. He didn't even know his own name anymore. Nimai said, "Leave aside this poem for now and compose another one." Another one? So, if you've ever been doing a service of sorts for Krishna and you get to a certain point and you think you've done an awesome job and something happens beyond your control and you have to go back and start all over again, don't feel bad. I feel like this is what he does. Nimai said, "Leave aside this poem for now and compose another one." And yet the great world-conquering pundit was unable to compose even a single verse. He simply sat before the Lord in a state of complete bewilderment. Even the great personalities, Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva, have become bewildered in the Lord's presence. And so what is surprising if the Digvijay Pandit lost his composure? Vrindavan Das Thakur confidently says all the Lord's pastimes are for the ultimate benefit of the suffering living entities and are meant to release them from material bondage. Sometimes that release is very uncomfortable. While the Digvijay Pandit was struggling to accept his ignominious defeat, the students began to giggle and laugh excitedly. Nimai restrained them, however, and said in a soothing voice, "Let us stop here today. Please return home, and tomorrow we can continue our discussion. You must be tired after such a lengthy recitation. It's getting late." That's my favorite part of this pastime. My favorite part of this pastime is when his own students get so excited by the defeat of this Digvijay Pandit that now they kind of want to rub it in. They start laughing, and Nimai says, "Stop. Absolutely not." Keeping even the glory, keeping the pride of this scholar intact, even as he defeated him. Keeping true to his word that he thought in the beginning. If I defeat him in front of everyone, his pride will be lost. And if his pride is lost, his life is as good as lost. After all, Krishna he says to Arjuna, "For one who has been honored, dishonor is worse than death." So he doesn't just say these things just to say them. He keeps them in mind later on. And he understands how fragile the human psyche can be, how fragile someone's emotional state can be after having gone through such a defeat. And so he stops all of his students, and there are hundreds of them. He won't even allow them to rejoice in his victory at that point. And that kind of always reminds me of how I want to behave. No matter what, if I'm having a conversation, even if it turns into a debate, what I don't want is to smash someone so thoroughly that they've lost track of who they are, which end is up. And sometimes we can think as, devotees or people who have all of this philosophy, our goal is to go out there and smash everybody else's philosophy to pieces. But even if we do that, what's left of their faith then? Should we be the ones to break into pieces someone's faith so much that now they've got nothing left? Even the Lord himself wouldn't do it. So it reminds me of how I want to be. Reminds me of what I strive to be as an ambassador for Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, as a messenger for my Radha Govinda, Shri Radha Muralidhar. I don't want to be the one to break someone's faith so completely that they have nothing left. I want to leave at least that faith intact, even if we have to agree to disagree, even if we don't agree to call God by the same name. I don't want to force my views on someone else so much that now their whole life is upended. So let's see what happens to the poor Digvijay Pandit. The Lord's behavior was so gentle and compassionate that when he defeated a scholar, that person would not feel humiliation. Nimai said to the Digvijay, "Please go home now and study your books. Tomorrow I will ask you some questions, and you must try to answer them." Nimai was so merciful that in spite of his victory, he did not try to dishonor the Digvijay. The scholars and teachers of Navadvip were very affectionate toward Nimai because of his sweet disposition. Nimai and his students left the assembly to return home while the Digvijay sat alone on the shore of the Ganga in utter shame and dejection. He thought to himself, due to Mother Saraswati's benediction, no one in this world had been able to successfully confront me in debate. Neither the scholars of the 6 philosophical branches nor the authorities of Shastra could stand up to me. How then has my worshipful goddess allowed this insignificant teacher of children to defeat me? What did I do to offend the goddess of learning so that I have suffered such a humiliating defeat? I must try to find out the cause of all this. Those lines always remind me a little bit of Indra when he's in awe and he starts, raging. How? How could this have happened? Who is this kid? He's a little boy. And now all of the citizens of Vrindavan are listening to him. He hasn't even gone to school. How could he come up with philosophy that now a whole village is listening to him and taking away what was rightfully mine? So I feel like in the same vein, it's like, who is this kid? He's a school teacher. He doesn't even teach grown-ups. And yet I've defeated the entire world, and somehow I lost everything in that one moment. Having come to this conclusion, the Digvijay chanted his special mantras and then lay down to sleep. In his dream, Mother Saraswati looked at him with compassion, and she said, "O learned Brahman, I will reveal to you something that is confidential, even to the Vedas. If you disclose what I tell you, your life will be immediately taken away. The person who defeated you today is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I am his eternal servant, and out of humility, I do not feel worthy to even stand before him. Because of the Lord's presence, I could not appear on the tip of your tongue as I did in the past. This is not my fault, however, for even such personalities as Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva have become totally bewildered in his presence. And so what to speak of me? He who defeated you, appearing as a Brahmin boy, is the Supreme Lord residing in everyone's heart as Paramatma. It is he who appeared as Lord Varaha to lift up the world, and he appeared as Lord Nrsimha to protect the devotee Prahlad. He appeared again as Lord Vamana to trick Bali Maharaj, and in the process his lotus feet became the source of Mother Ganga. He appeared in Ayodhya as Lord Sri Ramachandra and performed many wonderful pastimes, ultimately killing the demon Ravan. He who is known as the son of Vasudev and Nanda Maharaj has now appeared as a young Brahmin boy immersed in the mood of a scholar. O Brahmin, to become the greatest of all scholars is not the real result of chanting the mantra that I gave you. You have now received the factual result, for you have seen the Supreme Lord, the master of the entire creation. Go quickly and take shelter of his lotus feet. Surrender yourself fully unto him. Do not doubt the reality of this dream." After saying this, Mother Saraswati disappeared. What I love is that she gave him a mantra, and he thought that mantra was to give him the goal of all knowledge. What she says is, it was kind of a trick. The goal of all knowledge is to get to that place where we are hankering after the devotional service, which will lead us to see the Lord face to face. This is the goal of all knowledge, the essence of all mantras. When the Digvijay woke up, he felt purified and most fortunate. It was dawn when he left, and upon arriving at Nimai's house, the Digvijay threw himself at the Lord's lotus feet. In return, Nimai lifted the Pandit up and embraced him. "Oh, it is you," said the Lord. "Why are you behaving like this?" "Just to attract your mercy," replied the Digvijay. "But you are an all-conquering scholar. Why are you acting like this?" asked Nimai. The Digvijay said, "My Lord, please hear me. The highest perfection of all activities is achieved simply by worshiping you. You are the Supreme Lord Narayan, having appeared in this age of Kali as a Brahmin. You defeated me, and yet you kept my honor intact. Who else but the Supreme Lord would act in this manner? I am convinced that you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I have traveled far and wide. I defeated the most qualified scholars in each place. They could not even understand my discourses, and so what to speak of find fault with them. But in your presence, my intelligence seemed to flee to where I do not know. I can now understand that this was an easy feat for you to accomplish because you are the Lord and Master of Mother Saraswati herself. This she personally revealed to me. I was wallowing in the mire of my material existence, but due to my immeasurable good fortune, I came here and met you face to face. I was captivated and deluded by the pursuit of mundane knowledge, and I roamed about, neglecting genuine, absolute wisdom. Still, destiny favored me, and so I was able to meet you. O Lord, kindly purify me by your benevolent glance, and thus destroy my nescience. Please instruct me so that unholy desires may never again enter my heart. From whom except you can I seek shelter? As a meek and surrendered soul, the Digvijay Pandit Keshav Kashmiri spoke with repentance to the Lord. Nimai said, O learned Brahman, you are certainly fortunate because Mother Saraswati resides on your tongue. But to conquer the world of mundane knowledge is not a suitable object for a truly wise person. Knowledge only becomes valuable when it culminates in worship of the Supreme Lord. Try to understand this fact very carefully. When death strikes and one is forced to vacate his material body, no one can take with him his mundane knowledge or opulence. Those who are learned and self-realized souls completely reject the transient and engage with unalloyed faith in the Lord's devotional service. Learned Brahman, you should now give up all other engagements and utilize your time by worshiping the lotus feet of Lord Krishna for the remainder of your life. Remember that the fruit of knowledge is tasted when one's heart and mind are unflinchingly attached to Lord Krishna's lotus feet. This is the advice that I offer to you. Saying this, Nimai embraced the Digvijay Pandit so that at once the shackles of his material bondage fell away. The Lord said, O Brahman, curb your arrogance, worship Lord Krishna, and exhibit kindness to all living entities. What a sweet instruction. Worship Lord Krishna and exhibit kindness toward all living entities. And be careful not to reveal what Mother Saraswati had told you. Revealing the confidential knowledge of the Vedas to unworthy persons decreases one's lifespan and deviates one from the spiritual path. Which is why we have that it is an offense to preach to the faithless. Having thus received the Lord's instructions, the Digvijay took permission to depart, while repeatedly falling to the ground to offer obeisances and prayers. By the Lord's mercy, the Brahman was blessed with complete detachment from material affairs and perception of the absolute truth. Instantly, his arrogance diminished, so that he became as humble as a blade of grass. He renounced everything, his elephants, palanquins, wealth, and undesirable associates. After becoming the recipient of Lord Gaurachandra's mercy, he abandoned everything and continued to travel alone. Indeed, that mercy could make a king give up his palace and pick up a beggar's bowl. The shining example of this is Rupa Goswami, who gave up his kingly position to live in the forests of Vrindavan after achieving the mercy of Lord Gauranga. Any person who has not realized the value of devotional service to Lord Gauda Hari will naturally consider the enjoyment of royal opulence to be a most enviable position. But for the devotee of Lord Chaitanya, such kingly comfort is of no consequence. Reality and true happiness lies solely in the merciful glance of the Supreme Lord. For this reason, the Vedas advise everyone to serve him. Nimai's wonderful defeat of the Digvijay Pandit and the Pandit's conversion to Vaishnavism soon became known all over Nadia. The people were astonished and glorified Nimai with great enthusiasm. Still, by the influence of the Lord's Yogamaya potency, in spite of witnessing such miracles, no one could understand Nimai's true identity. Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur concludes this chapter saying, I offer my obeisances at the feet of all the residents of Navadvip, for they were fortunate enough to witness the Lord's transcendental pastimes. Whoever faithfully and attentively hears this narration of the Lord defeating the Digvijay Pandit, Keshav Kashmiri, will always emerge victorious. Shri Gaura Chandra Mahaprabhu ki jai, Shri Krishna Chandra Bhagavan ki jai, Vaishnav Thakur ki jai. So there we have it. Yesterday was celebrating the victory of Lord Sri Ram, but now today we can celebrate the victory of all of us. Anyone who faithfully and attentively hears this narration will always come out victorious. And because Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur has said it, and the Lord is very, 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 very fond of upholding the promises and the words of his devotees, I can take that as an absolute promise for all of us. May we all be victorious, and may we all, somehow or other, receive the merciful glance of Sri Gaura Hari. Thank you so, so much. Now is the point where, if there are any questions, you can.
Yeah, thank you, Chita Gopi, for such a wonderful and lively presentation. Okay, I encourage everybody to share their realizations, ask their questions. Now is the time, please. Srimad Bhagavatam consists of questions and answers. All right, don't hesitate, don't be shy. Or else we're going to nominate a person who will ask a question. Okay. Athena, you have a question? Angel, maybe?
My dear Yashoda Dulal is here.
Ribol, I have no question, but a word of appreciation for my very, very dear friend Achyuta. Always love your classes. We get so enlivened, and it's not just kirtan as in singing, but you're doing kirtan through speaking Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Bhagavat, and Chaitanya Charitamrita. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it. And, we'll see you every Ekadashi. So we're so glad you signed on for every Ekadashi.
I was actually thinking about you when I was thinking about this lecture because of our conversation where we were talking about reading Chaitanya Bhagavat and Chaitanya Charitamrita. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, Balaram Perez Babu shared something in the chat board.
And Sharadiya Ras Devi has a question, or she has her hand raised. Please unmute yourself.
Hare Krishna, Achyuta Gopi. Thank you so much. It was such...
Oh wait, it got muted again.
You got muted again.
Haribol. Hopefully I'm unmuted. So I really appreciated the point you made that although Lord Chaitanya had to defeat this devotee, and they had philosophical differences, he didn't want him to kind of be embarrassed, and he immediately stopped his disciples when they were like laughing. So he had the sensitivity of like not, wanting to like crush him, I think, especially in public. And then you were saying how important it is when we speak to people, even if we have philosophical differences, that we should not necessarily feel like we want to crush their philosophy, because then what's going to happen to their faith? So my question is, when we do ever engage in dialogue, I was speaking to someone who follows Islam, and they were saying to me that they feel it's our right to kill animals because animals were created, for us. That's their purpose. They're there for our existence. So how do you engage strangers in such dialogue? Because if I'm speaking of someone, in that instance, I kind of feel like I don't want to just agree and say, well, that's good because that's your religion. I want to respect it, but at the same time, I do feel it could be valuable for them to also hear another perspective. So how do we share our perspective? Like, okay, this is what we believe, but at the same time, in such a way that we show respect for the other person's perspective. And as you said, we don't, because what really struck me is you said, like, what will happen to their faith? So how do we share our perspective without, I would say, breaking their faith or damaging their faith or coming across like, we are looking down upon their religion? Because if we like really criticize one aspect, the person might feel that we, completely disrespecting their whole, religious practices. I hope that makes sense.
It does. And what's very cool is that you and Balaram Nityananda had almost the same question, which is nice because I get to like answer them both. And it's like preaching versus sharing, like there's a didactic element to preaching sometimes where it's like, I have all this philosophy, I'm going to teach you and give you, versus sharing, which is this is my viewpoint, this is the realization that I've had, this is where I'm at, and then also hearing somebody else's perspective. So I feel as though, especially when we get with people with other faiths and other viewpoints, we have to kind of be aware, like you can't give what you don't have. Does that make sense? And I feel like when people begin with, so I feel as though it's my right to kill animals because they're here. I mean, what else could they be for? Somehow. And while we might think that doesn't make any sense to me. Srila Prabhupada has so many times said, he's like, we are Prasadarians. He's like, over and above being vegetarians or any denomination of vegetarian that will come up, or macro or micro or whatever the digestion is going to handle, or gluten-free or not, we are engaged in trying to get the prasad of the Lord. We are trying to, like, the whole goal of our dietary restrictions, the entire goal of all of these things is to ultimately please the Supreme Personality of Godhead through all of our actions. And so if one person says, well, I believe this is my right to kill animals, I'm like, I could see that. Okay. And because that's not the first time that someone has thought that. It wouldn't even have been the first time someone would have thought it now or from time immemorial. There are so many innumerable living entities. There have been sages in the past. There have been kings in the past. There have been pure devotees in the past that were given allowances to eat animals. In fact, a lot of the fire yajnas, etc., used lots of animals. So sometimes we have to take all the philosophy and move ourselves off the pedestal, so to speak, because I feel as though we find a moral high ground and then we attach ourselves to that to win an argument. So sometimes it's about winning the argument, and then we found a moral high ground. Well, you shouldn't be, because that's killing another, booties on our feet. so that we make every step as soft as humanly possible, and we are not like we don't breathe in anything, we don't go and like, it's difficult to say that no, we should just have you don't harm any other living entities. And then we have an entire arti ceremony with a conch shell that we blow first and after. Comes from an animal. We have a peacock fan. We have a chamara fan. We light a fire in the middle. We do all of these things that are, whether we can see it or not, causing disturbances to other living entities. It's the mark of the material world. And so sometimes, instead of arguing the tiny points of this material world, better to look at the overall theme of, okay, cool, you've decided that. But really, the overall theme, the overreaching theme is, how do we get out? No matter what path our faith takes, how do we get out of this situation? Because all it's doing is furthering this. The difference for me between preaching and praying is the difference between principles and details. Right? We have the principles. How do we do that? And then we have the details, all the things that get caught up in the middle. And I was having a conversation with a few friends, and we were talking about people that we meet and people that we preach to. And I was saying that, I think about the children, because I used to teach Sunday school. And I would turn to my sister and I'd be, somehow we have to be able to give this Krishna consciousness in a way that's going to make sense. Because at a certain point, because we were reading Mahabharata with them, I said, in a minute, they're going to get to a certain point in Mahabharata where Bhima is going to do some questionable things. He's going to inflict a lot of harm on a lot of people. He's going to engage in some meat eating, and he's going to do some things. And then he's not going to go to hell for those things. So we have to somehow make it make sense. Right? We have to look at it and then really think, okay, we have principles and details. So we have these principles, regulative principles. And then we think, we're like, well, if that was okay for the Pandavas, why is it not okay for us? Which, brings me also back to the point of, we can think about all the things we want to do. Maybe some of us want to go out and drink a whole bunch of wine. But we also then have to think about our overall Krishna consciousness. Is that really going to be better for us? Are we really strong enough to deal with all the other reactions that snowball from that? So our minds might tell us, okay, a little break of this one reg over here might not send you to hell. But then we have to ask ourselves, but do we want to push it? Do we really want to push the envelope in that direction? Because there will be reactions. They might not be immediate hellish planet reactions, but there will be reactions. And my sister is always fond of saying, material world is just about actions and reactions. You have to decide which reactions you want. Which always, I'm like, that sounds so ominous when you say it. But so the difference for me between preaching and sharing is about principles and details. If I can find a principle that we can relate on, it becomes less about me trying to teach, save, uplift, and more just about sharing. You know what's worked for me? This has worked for me. Enthusiasm has worked for me. You know what hasn't worked for me? Fear. The fear base doesn't work for me long term. But you know what does work for me? Falling in love with the divine person. A divine person who also wants to get to know me, who also has already known me and is saying, but you know what? I'll get to know you all over again. Just come a little closer. And somehow when I'm able to relate with people on those things that have worked for me, it changes from preaching to sharing. And I wind up having better conversations and better interactions because I feel as though you never know who anyone is. They say that the demigods are really fond of talking to people in disguise. And what if the one day I decided to be a jerk, on my high horse of Krishna consciousness, And that's the day that I wind up having a conversation with some wonderful, wonderful being who I've looked up to for so long. And they've just come to see, let me see how these people are spreading my Mahaprabhu's movement. What if Lord Shiva decided, let me go and speak and see how they're handling my Mahaprabhu's movement? It would be such a shame if, because of my external vision and my looking at all the divisive things between us, I wasn't able to connect. I hope that answered both questions.
Thank you, Achyuta Gopi. That was so beautiful and so inspiring. I hope we can clip that part of your of the class and then we can watch it again. Oh. You can share it for us on Instagram or something.
You can watch it on YouTube and just fast forward to that part, because it'll be on YouTube. It's simultaneously on YouTube and it'll be there later on. The Temple at Bhakti Center, that's the channel.
Yeah, Angel, go ahead.
Hare Krishna. It's so lovely to see you on a Saturday morning, and your storytelling is so captivating, as well as your voice.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. The fact that you mentioned social media, I've gotten triggered so many times in social, especially Instagram, and it puts me in a state where I really question myself. Is it even worth it to post something, or is it even worth it to maintain? So I tend to suspend it and purge my mind from it all, and then I go back when I'm ready, and then oh my God, your points, how you're so beautiful in every way. Thank you so much. Your mother, you have this motherly nature that just comes out so naturally. You're a great teacher. That the message that you just gave across is so heartfelt, and it's so true. We may think that we may be saints and we have the right to correct others, and it's all an illusion at the end. But we don't always think about the moment we step outside, and we don't look for the ants. So it's something to really consider, and I really appreciate everything, your time and your beautiful voice. I always listen to you on my phone too, like when I listen to Kirtan. Thank you. I feel the victory the last time we did Kirtan together. Thank you so much for everything.
Yeah, the social media struggle is real. You and me both. Yeah, even just a few days ago, I was kind of like, I had a moment where I was like, you know what, Lord, I was just minding my business, doing something nice for you. And I feel like nobody can have anything nice. No one can do anything nice. And I made a post that was actually completely, totally just innocent. And somebody who I've known since I was maybe 8 or 9 took it the completely wrong way. And basically, they came and they said, they're like, I like what you wrote, but I just find it hard to believe that you're actually this way. I was like, I'm sorry, what? What's happening? Where's this even coming from? And so they're like, no, it just seems really hypocritical, like every religious institution has its problems. And I said, but I wasn't talking about a religious institution. It was about spirituality as a whole. I didn't mention not one institution. I mentioned none. I just said spirituality. And so she's like, but you can't see that you're part of the problem because you've bought in to the institution. I was like, whoa, First of all, we haven't spoken in decades. Why? Why? Why are you coming after me? I haven't done anything to you. I haven't insulted you. I didn't even speak to you to be able to insult you. Why? Where is this coming from? And the entire time I just kept asking that question, where is this coming from? And for about an hour and a half, it was like trying to defeat a Digvijay Pundit, because they had all of this philosophy that they had literally kind of just cooked up in their mind. It wasn't really based on anything at all. And her main concern and her main issue was, according to her, I hadn't had any real struggles, and so I had no idea what it was like for people who did have struggles, and why would I choose to stay in a religious institution where there were struggles. I was like, hold up. Are you aware of who you're talking to? Like, you really think that I haven't had any struggles? Like, one thing that I can say is that there are certain bodies that come with a karmic load. And speaking frankly, people of color have bodies that come with it comes with the territory. It's like if you go live in California, there's not going to be a lot of rain, ever. And here it's like no matter where you go in the world, somehow everybody's banded together and figured out that people of color can be a target. And so I'm like, do you really think that? You really think I have no struggles and I'm completely blind to what's going on in the world? You really honestly believe what you're saying? And she's like, well, if you're not blind to it, how can you continue on? I was like, because it's the only thing that makes sense. It's the only thing that makes sense. The only thing that makes sense to me is figuring out how to get out of this whole entangling circle. Because if I just focus on fixing my one problem here, that leads me to focus on another problem at the time of death, which just gives me a whole new situation to work out. Better that I figure out a way to end the issues altogether. And I can't do that here. Because ultimately, Krishna has said, this is not home. We can make it look comfortable. We can dress it up. We can hang ornaments from it. But it's still a prison. We named it a prison. It's called Durgadam. Durga means prison. Like, it's in the name. They weren't even trying to fool us when they did it. Like, they made this whole thing, and then we were like, okay, no problem. But we're going to make it a mansion. Like, it's a prison, right? Like, but we're going to make it look good on the outside. No one will know. So yeah, this spirituality, this Krishna consciousness is the only thing that makes sense. And he was about to be honored for a miracle that had taken place. And he thought, well, they're going to start respecting me. I'm going to leave. Because he didn't want to get caught up in all the pride and the prestige. Because, as we see, Krishna's not always so fond of that part. So he said, I'll leave. But it said that his devotional service followed him like a shadow. And so that pride kept following him. It didn't affect him negatively. But the effulgence of Krishna's service would follow him. So yeah, this Krishna consciousness is the only thing that makes sense when nothing else does. And so she's like, well, I had a rough childhood and your posts about Govinda trigger me. And I was like, I don't know what to tell you. You got to keep scrolling. I didn't make you look at them. I just post him. He's handsome. And her issue was no one can be like that. But you can't give what you don't have. So because she was hurting, because she felt slighted, because she felt like she wanted desperately a relationship that she was unable to get. She had decided nobody could be like that. And after talking and expressing my views, and knowing that I was about to give this lecture because it happened like 2 days ago, knowing that I was about to give this lecture and having Mahaprabhu in mind going, listen, we all know we are capable of the clapback, right? Everybody has that fierce nature and they're able to say things on the internet that they would never say in person, and they're able to cut the person down. And I'm thinking, Achyuta Gopi, you're about to give a lecture wherein you're going to say that you want to be more like this example of Mahaprabhu. Don't do it. And so I tried to just be as genuine as humanly possible. And at the end of the conversation, this person who was former Gurukuli, grew up in this movement and had left this Krishna consciousness, admitted that while they have issues with the institution, they still can't shake that love for Krishna. So I kind of feel like it's so important to, even when you are tested, because we're going to be tested, even when we are brought to the brink of like, you're a hypocrite and all this, nobody can be like that. And you're like, seriously? Ah. But it's so important to try. We might not always succeed, but if we just endeavor, Krishna carries the rest. If we show up and we try to make that endeavor and we say, okay, Krishna, I'm just going to try and share my view as authentically and genuinely as humanly possible, somehow or other, Krishna does everything else. Doesn't matter how many pastimes we know or not. We could know just one line of one pastime, and that might be enough to change the hearts of thousands of people. All it takes is our genuine conviction. So that's kind of how I view my social media journey, because definitely after that, I kind of thought to myself, I was like, I could close down this whole account right now, go back to reading in my room. And then I thought, but no, but it's a service. And if I don't post about Krishna, I'm sure other people will. But also, I have a thing, and I get like overly excited. So sometimes they're like awesome things about Krishna, and I just feel like, but somebody should know. So I have no choice. I have to keep trying. And I pray that we all keep trying, and I pray that we all come out victorious. I really feel like we all needed that last benediction from Vrindavan Das Thakur, because it's hard out there, that this internet life. You know, one of the interesting things that they said about Mahaprabhu was that Lord Gauranga would defeat their arguments and their philosophical debates, but to their face. Like, that's something that's not done now. Everybody does everything online. And then you type furiously. And then you close your computer. Or you like log out of your phone. But then nobody goes to see anybody in person. It's like, would we really be interacting like this in person? Probably not. We don't have the courage. We don't have the fortitude. But the debaters of Navadvip, they were hardcore. They were the real deal. They actually had the fortitude where if they were going to stand by their philosophical debates, they were going to do it face to face. If they were going to defeat you, they were going to do it face to face. None of this like hiding behind computer screens. So this internet world is rough stuff, because people will badmouth you and then go on about their day and forget all about it. But we can huddle together. My Guru Maharaj and Sachinandan Maharaj both would say, like, when you're in like a train car, you know, everybody's like all squished in. We know what that's like in New York. But just like everybody's squished into that packed train compartment, we can all huddle together and get on this boat and get out of this situation together as fast as possible.
Lovely. Thank you.
Social media. I mean, even if you anyone else? We good?
Just want to say wow. Just want to say wow and thank you. Angel, your sincerity every time you speak is heartbreaking. Achuta Gopi, your answers were so nourishing. Thank you. That last encounter was just amazing. Thank you so much. Wow.
Thank you all for being like the crew of some of my favorite people in the whole universe. I look forward to seeing I look forward to every single Ekadashi. And I looked forward to Ekadashis before, but now it's new levels. And I kind of felt like we have worldwide people. You know, we have Balaram Nityananda, he's like, you know, used to be Mayapur Vasi, but in my mind you'll always be a Mayapur Vasi. So when we were reading about Navadvip and Mahaprabhu's pastimes there, I'm like, hey, I feel like he brought the Navadvip vibes for us. So thank you, everybody. And I think with that, we'll probably see each other next Ekadashi. Shri Ekadashi Devi ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Radha Murlidhara ki jai. Shri Gaura Chandra Mahaprabhu ki jai.